Not that all of you are here. So really glad you're here with us. Feel free to speak to me after if you have.
Thank you, Doug. In that survey, 85% of the response and how it impacts people about climate change negatively affecting and perhaps what we can do about it. University, enjoying the time it's spent doing research in adolescent psychiatry's the national nonprofit climate. So we welcome Joshua.
There you go. Can everyone think about climate change and its effects on? This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Briefly at the end of the talk too. Climate change is not just something of the future. The past 24 years, 7 of the ripples on weirding of weather are becoming increasingly distressing. Really is. Second, we're going to talk about distress are. Segment, and I'll play some of their.
And smoke from record-setting despair or anxiety.
Climate change has affected my necessary changes now.
Taking seriously enough.
Because this is all we have.
Daily life by the decision. And because I'm living in a city that when I realized that the climate change crisis, it so clearly showed.
I think it was when I started to have a full-on panic attack with like
Climate change is affecting their feelings.
Voicing very similar feelings. In America, France, and Brazil, children are experiencing them. However, we have to offer treatment to support. And 29% say that they're very worried. The parent study from the one that was that of the way that they think that their worries about climate functioning is affected. So this is 5 about their thoughts and feelings. This blue line here states in the South and the New. Texas was the second states that are actively witnessing and experiencing the natural disaster secondary to climate change. A small minority of people are not worried at all about climate change, just close to 85% of Democrats. Is the government acting in the party and exposure to severe climate distress? Point out that this looks like Republicans have sense that they've experienced. It kind of maintains. When asked about how climate change parties had a similar increase in, so young people who are more likely to have climate distress. They had fun and had their ability to concentrate, but almost none of them talked about it with their therapist to talk about how they're feeling. So, for example, communities of color were hunted down, or it's nature than some other cultures might. And that's amplified even more if you come. And then people with disabilities, whether they be mental, climate change and climate distress, determinants of health, which many of you may be social determinants of health, to then amplify of adults are very to extreme. Talk to a therapist about that. Now keep that old, close to baby boomers and of the silent generation. So threefold. When we think about how we can try to support a person when they come to us, either a child coming to a parent and wanting to give them support, or started to be developed to provide support for climate distress. And I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail, but I'll list them first. Problem-focused coping. So this has to do with getting kids engaged. There's emotion to try to foster this positive idea that's really decreases someone's feelings of hopelessness. Part of a community of people that if a child today, right? That can be really helpful. A good example might be distort in that way. And so we can lead ourselves to de-emphasize the asteroid coming closer to Earth. How do we find meaning in the face of climate change? I can say this for myself, survived the Holocaust and committed to trying to work in that diversity. But there are studies that also to an end, there's nothing human. So and this is just one path. Locals, only 20% mainline Protestants, or as to why different communities might be more who were climate concerned versus not climate. If you thought that there were bigger, and this was respondents who were attending or part of, helping, honestly, that's great. It would be a temple that was doing what they called put behind you. So this revert to try to help support patients, or specifically for young people, what adults are doing, not having words to. So
Dear Coco and Pecan, worse and worse. I'm scared climate.
Poor Coco felt worried, but Pecan soon asked, as he can be changed, and I'll show you how. First, take a deep pull of your might, and be scary for all, and will tell us the story. Can make it all stop. What can I do? Are there others who care? Hi, Pepper. What wind power helps to stop climate? You know, Dad. Now at school, or as Coco in City Hall. Please listen, Judge. Next speaker. Do others feel stressed? They cried. I flew from a for Climate Connect. Great, I'll send it all over the globe. They're trying to get more involved, not upset.
That little kind of fun psychiatrist and psychotherapist environment, you saw the breathing technique, feel more comfortable and can talk is important. Black and white thinking, things are individual actuals. People pretty much can get around the fact that, and will hopefully, a famous case that many of you live in a clean world. Pointing kids to examples didn't do that case on their own, they're hoping. And these slides will be sent out too, I believe, later on. The Climate Psychology Alliance is the sister organization to the Climate Psychiatry Alliance. There's a North American branch and there's a European branch. There are a slew of resources there. There's training about how to become a climate-aware therapist or a supporter of youth and their climate distress. There are a list of therapists if you want to get your child connected. And then there are also those groups I mentioned, like climate cafes. And then the American Child and Adolescent Psychiatry Academy, of which I'm also a part, has a resource center which has a number of different resources where you can learn more about climate change and mental health in kids and how to support kids. So there's a lot of stuff out there. These are just a couple of citations. Most of my slides have citations too that refer to the information. So thank you for bearing with me for the past hour, and I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
People have questions for John?
I was struck by what you said about how the young people you encountered at the psychiatric hospital in Rhode Island didn't want to talk about what they were anxious about when it came to climate anxiety. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the support, like they don't know if they're allowed to talk about it, or they like, or I'm just asking them why.
Yeah, no, Pastor, thanks so much for asking that, because it's such a great question. You know, people are in the room seeking help, so why are they not getting the help? And I mean, I think that what a couple of kids say is, you know, there are other bigger things that they're worried about. You know, if they're in therapy, maybe their parents are getting divorced. So they're, honestly, sometimes if you don't ask if they're suicidal, it's kind of uncomfortable. You know, it feels a little bit like a taboo thing to say, and they just won't talk about it. So as psychiatrists or mental health providers, we have to get good at asking those questions directly. And so I think that mental health providers have, among other social stressors, ask kids. I think we'd be surprised what they say.
Thank you so much for that talk. Two things struck me, especially being today when it's 26 degrees above normal. And so I've encountered adults who say, isn't this great? You know, the weather's so nice. And my reaction is, I don't know, I have this funny feeling. It's not supposed to be like this. So I think the question is, one, for adults, is there an answer that maybe is less, you know, more personable than what I tend to do, and not be a Debbie Downer, but also raise attention to the fact that this is not normal. And then also with our kids, you know, all this generation is prone to anxiety anyway. So when we talk about today, hey, it's a beautiful day, just so you know, it didn't used to be like this, and this is normal. Like, what's the line to draw in terms of just everyday?
This is such great questions. Regarding the first, you know, I think that it's a form of emotional coping, right? If you kind of go right to, oh, well, this isn't so bad, it's nice. Or, you know, Trump famously recently said, you know, more seafront property, you know, that's great. And I think that some people may be in different stages of their coping with climate change or their distress. A lot of adults haven't really found the words or really engaged with how they're feeling around climate change. And so I think that, you know, doing some version of what you did, which is, you know, yeah, it is a really beautiful day. And I also am worried about what this means for the future if this keeps getting worse. That duality, that dialectic. In terms of what to do with kids, you know, kids are smart, and maybe the youngest might not get it, but a lot of the older ones will, or they'll hear things and then they'll think, oh man, is this climate change? So they're probably thinking it anyway. And this comes to what I mentioned about suicide and kids not talking about it unless it's brought up. Well, the same is true, you know, a lot of people are worried about asking kids about these uncomfortable things because, oh, now they're going to start thinking about it, and I'm going to make my kids suicidal because I asked them if they were suicidal. And that the data just don't bear out for that, you know. So I think that just being open and, again, age appropriate, I think is better than not bringing it up at all.
I'd like to say something. I know. How many of you remember Indian Summer? It happens every fall at around this time. So today, it was gorgeous. Yesterday it was gorgeous. The day before. That is not all climate change. That is a normal thing that happens at around this time of the year, every year. At least it's been doing that since I was a kid. That was a couple of years ago. So yes, there is climate change. But the weather we've been having these last few days happens every fall at around this time. So you could say that to your kid, that, yeah, it's been really different, but it happens around this time every year. And yes, there is climate change, so maybe it was a little warmer than we're used to. But it's not just climate change that made the weather today and yesterday.
It should be voiced, right? I mean, in late spring, you know, someone might say, climate change, what are we talking about? And I think that's, the human brain is not great at large numbers and statistics and averages. And so pointing to one day and saying whether or not this is climate change, but pointing to trends is more substantial. And so, again, trying to help children understand that when we look at the data, or when we look at many, many days, and we look at how temperature changes, that's where we're worried.
Dr. Wartzel, could you please speak to how your field is reacting or preparing for dealing with more clients or patients that need treatment in this? Are there people who are specializing in climate anxiety treatment?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think that we're coming to realize that all psychiatrists need to be disaster-trained psychiatrists because it's, you know, hitting communities that before thought of themselves as climate havens, right? We think of Asheville with the recent hurricane and how they thought that they were safe. So I think there's a growing appreciation that there's a skill set that every psychiatrist needs to know. And I've been involved with others in developing curricula to try to make sure psychiatry trainees, and I know the same is happening on the psychology side, about how do you support kids with their climate distress and all the ways that climate change will impact mental health and is impacting mental health. Specifically, like, you know, is there going to be a subspecialty where people are climate psychiatrists? You know, there are not many people who are doing research in this space. I mean, me being as young as I am and being the chair of the two committees that I'm on is just to say that there are not many people doing this. I think that there will be more and more. I think that even if you look at just the publications over the past 5 years, it's skyrocketed, it's been logarithmic. I don't anticipate that that's going to change dramatically in terms of the trajectory. We know that, for example, the NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health, is now having its first climate and health scholar to come in this year and start trying to teach the mental health researchers about how climate change is impacting mental health. There are big grants from foundations that are all of a sudden asking for research in this space. So I wouldn't be surprised, knock on wood, because obviously I'm in this and I hope it continues to be a space where I can explore and grow. I would not be surprised if in the next 10 years we see a real increase in psychiatrists studying and being in the space. And maybe there will be some fellowship training in it as well. Another couple in the back too.
I was interested in your statistic that...
Hold the mic close to the mouth.
In your statistic that older people, what's wrong? that older people are less anxious about the climate. And I have a couple questions about that. One, is it because we feel guilty because we haven't done something? And then second of all, it would, at least in the case of my kids, my kids who have kids, they are so anxious about the environment, they don't know how to talk to their kids. And if we older people could get comfortable talking to our grandchildren, we might be the best communicators. So it's a two-part question.
That's a lovely question, and I think there's no absolute answer for different people. I think that in general, people as they get older, they become more traditionalist, or they're more conservative. They want to keep the world in the way that they know it. And so I think that there's some level of feeling like, this is the world that I grew up in, this is the world as I know it, it doesn't need to change. I think that many people, it's just kind of an existential thing. If you're not worried about what the world's going to be like in 30 years for yourself as imminently, then what's going to happen with climate change may feel less pressing. Whereas a lot of kids are thinking, oh my gosh, this is my future. Now granted, there are grandparents though who, and I think this has come up in the surveys, when they're anxious about climate change, it's often about what's going to happen to their grandkids. So I love your idea about, is this a group of people who may be some of the perfect people to talk about climate distress, because maybe they're a little less acutely worried themselves, but also come with such perspective. And also, every generation, especially the generations from in the early 1900s, have gone through tremendous adversity, right? Or the Cold War. And so there's a lot of perspective that you can bring to that generation about how to cope in the midst of great stress. I think the balance to strike, though, is it's easy to get into the mentality. It's like, well, we dealt with our stress, so you're overreacting. It's not too big of a deal, and you don't want to go there either. Thank you.
Well, I first of all wanted to say that I really liked the children's book.
Oh,
I
thank you.
really thought that was amazing, and also the animation of it. As a parent of 4 kids, and one that does a lot with climate change, and a lot. I just want to say, my daughter does, I'm going to get emotional, but she does like 10 to 15 hours every week in this community for climate change, and I think as a parent, it does create anxiety for me because she hasn't had always a positive experience. A lot of bullying in the Longmeadow School due to her commitment to this issue, and also I think trying to work with the state. She's worked with the government. She's been in Governor Keeley's, she's better at explaining all of this, but the point is, my question as a parent is, what do you do when you feel like your child is doing what they're supposed to do in terms of working hard to make things happen and feeling like there's a time frame attached to that? Like she feels like she has the scientific information saying things need to happen by a certain time. And they're young and they're not really in a position to have any power in terms of voting power. Their voice is very difficult to be heard. And I feel like as a parent of somebody that's very committed, I feel like in terms of the anxiety that produces, when you are doing the right things, when you are connecting to government, when you are writing the letters, when you are on the committees, when you're going all over the state and connecting with young people and adults, and just really your voice is still not being heard in the sense that it's actually having an impact on what's happening in terms of legislation and the things that really make a global impact. She's been very committed in local things. She's the one that spearheaded the metal utensils in town. She's done, her and her high school group has done a bunch of things in terms of recycling, reusing, trying to do fundraisers, very little support in terms of any financial support from the community or the school. We have to do all the fundraising on our own. It's a very, very big issue that has so many parts to it. I feel like as somebody who's so young and expected to do so many other things in terms of graduating high school and all the other pieces of being a high school student, I feel like a lot of, she's worked with BayPath and all these different organizations and documentaries and been on the news, 22
Wow.
News, and I feel like for her to do all of those things and then still feel at the end of the day that nothing has really been accomplished, I feel like as a parent that's difficult. Because I don't really feel that like I can really ask, or anyone can really ask anymore of somebody who's a youth. But I do feel like it's not fair that their voices, they're going to experience the full impact of climate change, and their voice, it's very, very hard for them to have any kind of power.
Yeah.
So I feel like as a parent, just trying to understand like that level.
I was actually going to say the same thing, so thank you. No.
Maybe we want to hear about their group at the high school. I would like to hear about it. Would you be able to tell us? Is that okay?
Why don't we let him respond quick? And then
Okay,
you guys
yep.
can come up front.
Yeah, that would be great. So, gosh, there's so much to say with what you had just mentioned. And I think this gets to that point about the con of activism or action-focused coping is you run the risk of doing a lot and feeling like it doesn't necessarily yield exactly what you were hoping for. But I think some of what we need to do as adults is help contextualize how even seemingly small gains do make a significant impact. So for example, climate change is happening, right? And it's going to continue happening because there are so many huge forces at play. But even slightly changing that trajectory will change the kinds of ramifications we have for our futures. And also the inspiration that you have for other individuals, adults, but even kids too, that has a huge impact, and there are ripple effects that we don't see necessarily on the individual level. But that's just me kind of trying to offer, kind of a justification for what you're doing. The real lived experience, though, is you have a child who is doing everything she can, and she's not seeing the immediate effect, and maybe even receiving. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. Right.
She was trying to show that at the school, but I think it was just very difficult for the school to really support the students in understanding that.
Right. And I think, oh, sorry.
I just feel like it just goes to the point that the kids feel like they don't really have any control.
And that's definitely a sentiment that's come up in these surveys, is the feeling of powerlessness, or the feeling that adults are not doing enough. I do want to point, though, out to just what we know about bullying in general, right? Bullying happens when young people are using their own psychological defenses to kind of feel good in the midst of often feeling really bad. So who knows why these other kids are being so unsupportive. It could be that it's a way of them getting out their frustration for their parents yelling at them or being mean to them at home, or it could be something more directly about climate change. It could be that they're really worried about the world and climate change, but they just feel angry. And they feel like the easiest way to get out that anger is the person who's right in front of them who seems to be doing something that's like small, that the world is not doing enough. You're just doing a small thing. And so, bullying is such an interesting space of why kids act the way they do. Doesn't help, it's not fair to know that, but just to recognize that it may be coming from their place of their own climate distress.
So we're going to wrap up here at 8:30, folks. But I wanted to invite the students to come forward. Frank, do you have a quick question?
Yes, I hope we're not causing you additional anxiety by asking you to come up. Then please, if you would.
I guess first I just want to say thank you for all the support and everything that you guys have been saying and the appreciation from you all. I'm the president of the LHS Climate Change Club, and Mia is, I guess, kind of like my vice president. And yes, in the recent years, we were doing a switch from plastic to metal utensils, throwing them away and stuff. So currently, we have plastic, but there has been a donation of metal utensils, so they're thinking of putting that back in. But I know that from getting the metal utensils in the high school, Center School did also implement metal utensils, because I've been working with the Green Club, which my sister's in, there, to help do all that. Me and Mia are both on the Youth Climate Leadership Program under Mass Audubon. So we work on holding a Youth Climate Summit with schools all over Western Mass, and then some in Connecticut, coming to talk about climate change, get them involved. And we actually do a segment on like eco-anxiety and hope and things like that. I'm also on the Massachusetts Youth Climate Governors Council, and last year my segment of the group worked on writing a proposal to the governor about school decarbonization. And then we've also discussed other things like transportation, energy, and also climate education, because that's become a big spearhead. I was also on the Long Meadow Long Range Plan Steering Committee, and I was the clerk and of the youth liaisons. And a lot of the focus was on climate change for like the next 20 years for Long Meadow, and that plan did get approved recently, I think a month or two ago, and they're applying for an award right now that I have to write the essay for, but there's that as well. So that's something that our community is doing, so it's something that's in plan that our government is doing. And from that, they also made a climate perspectives document that I was interviewed in. That is also under Long Meadow. It's like on YouTube or something, and that's when I was interviewed in the news as well. Trying to think, do you have anything you want to say?
I don't want to embarrass Charlotte anymore, but she's been really inspiring to me. I'm a year younger, and I joined the Climate Change Club at the high school in freshman year. And before that, I hadn't really been involved with, I don't know, I've been reading National Geographic since I was like 9 years old, and I really felt very strongly about the issue, but I didn't feel like there was anything I could do. And then I joined, and it was so inspiring, and she pushed me to join other things, and like, I'm a lot happier now for it. But I still do feel like there's like a problem, I don't know, especially amongst teenagers, just maybe a general disposition, but like climate anxiety can turn into apathy, and it's really hindered our efforts, but there's still hope, so we're excited.
This is a little bit, it's related, but just so you all know, we have been discussing a possibility of doing a climate festival, like about climate solutions and giving like 3 proposed climate solutions here in Long Meadow on the Green. So we are trying to find ways of funding if anyone's interested. We started a GoFundMe like 2 days ago, and I recently sent in the form to the town to get approval. So if anyone's interested, let me know. I would love that. That would be great. Anyways, thank you. If you have any questions for me, let me know.
I mean, I think that just the last thing I'll say is, you know, as adults, we have to just be so inspired by what kids are doing and to try to do our part in however we can. And I think that the most imminent way we could do that is to make sure we go out and vote, and make sure other people go out and vote. You know, the current administration, for what it's worth, has done more than anything else America has done for trying to address climate change. So hopefully we can keep up that momentum. That's my shameless plug.
Again, I just want to thank all of you for joining us tonight, and especially to say a special thanks to Josh or Dr. Wartzel for your good work. And it is, I was sitting there thinking, wow, somebody so young is one of the top experts in the field, but it makes sense too. And it really is great. I'm grateful for your courage in entering the field and also expanding it in the realm of psychiatry and psychology. So thanks. Frank, did you have another announcement or? All right, go ahead. Oh, you want the mic? This is the last question, though. We're going to do the last one. Better be a good one, too, Frank.
So my question is, early in your presentation, you cited a number of figures about the percentage of adults that were experiencing climate anxiety. And I heard similar kinds of numbers coming out in a report out from New England Public Media. At the same time, they had a follow-up question, which was, what is the likelihood that climate change will influence your vote when you vote for your candidate of your choice? And the answer for most of the people responding was it would have very little influence, or it was very low on their priority. And so I'm wondering if, from a psychological perspective, if you could comment on what appears to be a dissociation between cause and effect.
Yeah, gosh, that's a great question. I think that was a good question. My short answer would be that most of society is dealing with very imminent challenges, right? If they can't afford their groceries, or there's a lot of politicking around, like, the threat of immigrants or migrants, and so a lot of people are fed different messages about what the most pressing issues are, and those perhaps from a psychological standpoint, it's a lot easier to scapegoat and have, going back to that black and white thinking, there's a bad guy, there's something we can do, we can keep them out, and then we'll be better. Whereas climate change is like, well, heck, I'm contributing to climate change, and like, who do we go to stop climate change? Maybe the oil companies, but then like, wait a second, my uncle, is part of the fossil fuel industry, and all of a sudden, it's so much more integrated. We call climate change a wicked problem, because once you start pulling on one thread, you wind up pulling on so many others, and the knot gets tighter. And I think that humans like to find a way of coping by being very concrete, and there are more concrete things being talked about in the election that I think are driving people's votes. And not to mention, I mean, like things like, Roe v. Wade, the ability to have, right to, or women's ability to choose, things like that feel maybe more imminently like that could affect me next month. Climate change is something that maybe I'm going to get a bad storm or something, and it just doesn't feel as top of mind. So that's a very quick, dirty answer to that, but it's a great question, and one that honestly we have to continue to grapple with to move the society along. Yeah.
I'm sure if you have a lingering question, you can come up and talk to Josh directly, but we wanted to respect your time and give thanks again for your participation tonight. Thank you.